We've come to the Anglo-Saxon village in West Stow in eastern England to talk about this extraordinary development critical to our constitutional history. The fusion of rule of law with self-government that takes place when the Saxons come to Romanized Britain as bloodthirsty conquerors, and yet within a century and a half are transformed into Christian defenders of peace and order. It's one of the many parts of the story that is miraculous. I don't use that word lightly, I use it deliberately, because part of the message of all our documentaries is that history is not a mechanical process of great forces grinding inexorably forward, before which individuals are helpless. It's a story of individuals making decisions, and in the British Isles in particular, making decisions about the kind of realm that they will have, the kind of people that they will be, that give us this gift of liberty under law. Things happen that may seem logical afterward, but that were wildly improbable at the time. And few can be more wildly improbable than the transformation of the bloodthirsty Saxon invaders who more or less wiped out Roman Britain into defenders of peace and order in the space of about a century and a half. The Saxons come swarming across the North Sea. They get their name from that sax, or short axe they carried, which I assure you had many uses besides chopping wood. They massacre the inhabitants. They leave bodies out for the crows and the wolves. And then they are evangelized. They start to produce law codes, and they add something to the passion for liberty and the belief in liberty under law that was characteristic of Roman Britain. There is a deep-seated habit of self-government. Tacitus comments on this among the Germanic tribes, the way in which the community participates in lawmaking and the choosing of kings and chieftains. And many centuries later, when Montesquieu's looking at Britain and what makes it different, he invokes Tacitus and this Germanic habit of self-government. This common law, the fact that legal practices are largely informal and unwritten, and again derived from the consent of the governed, which is not that unusual in small-scale societies. But you add it to the Roman belief in the rule of law, and the idea they'd fumbled with but never really solved, that somehow you should acquire the consent of the people, and something quite extraordinary happens. And this isn't just a matter of transplanting German institutions, because self-government does not arise in Germany. There's this alchemy that takes place in Britain. Although the Saxons show up as bloodthirsty invaders, they are evangelized. They are also very impressed by Rome, by the civilization they defeat. They live in thatched huts. They know nothing about stone buildings, including how to maintain them. But they start to adopt some critical habits, including the development of law codes. But the law codes that develop here, beginning with that of Ethelbert of Kent, the first one that is extant, and Ethelbert, incidentally, is one of the very first of the Anglo-Saxon and Jute kings. He's actually a Jute to convert to Christianity. It is not an abstract tome derived from first principles covering all situations like, say, Justinian's. What it is in a number of particular areas, it clarifies what the common law says, the habitual, unwritten law of the community, because some kind of dispute had arisen. And when the king says this is the law, he's not acting as an autocrat, telling his people what to do. He's recording the consensus of the community about exactly how this should be read. And Germanic law, among other attributes, had a great emphasis on property as a personal thing, that the ownership and use of objects and of land inhered in the individual, not in the family or the clan or the tribe. And yet this is not simply a matter of transplanting habits from the continent to Britain. Something very special exists here between Athens, Jerusalem, Rome, and the Germanic habit of self-government and common law. You got a constitutional order here in the British Isles that was worth defending against the Danes or Vikings in the 10th century, that was worth defending against Norman overlords, culminating in dragging John to Runnymede and making him seal Magna Carta, that was worth defending against the Stuarts in the 17th century, that was worth fighting for in the two World Wars and the Cold War, and that is still worth defending today. Now, Anglo-Saxon England was obviously a land of self-sufficient communities in all kinds of ways. But one of these was defense. Essentially, villages like the one recreated here in West Stow in East Anglia and the kingdom were dependent upon something called the Fyrd, a citizen militia, that represented the nation in arms, protecting hearth and home, and also its right to be consulted about the laws under which it was governed. Now, that's not untypical of small-scale communities throughout history and around the world. But it's something that the Anglo-Saxons shared with the Romans and the Greeks. When they fought wars, it was the citizens taking up arms. And it's something you don't find in the Persian Empire. It's something you don't find in France under Louis XIV. It's something you don't find under Philip II in Spain. It's a unique feature of the Anglosphere. And you think about the 20th century and the role that Canadians played in both world wars, that they were elite troops for all kinds of reasons, one of which is that they were familiar with arms and proficient in their use. But there's something more than that. When citizens fight for hearth and home, as G.K. Chesterton said, the soldier fights not because he hates what's in front of him, but because he loves what's behind him. That's not true of mercenaries. To a surprising degree, it's not true of professional military elite armies. But it is true of the citizen soldiers who have won victories against improbable odds, from the Armada to the Napoleonic Wars to both world wars. The Anglosphere wins wars as the Romans won wars, primarily because it is the citizenry taking up arms in a just cause.